First of all, I want to welcome everybody here. I think you're going to find this to be a very informative and productive session. The one we held yesterday in Bridgeport was wildly successful, and I think we'll have the same type of animated discussion here this morning as well. A couple of things in terms of the bios that Arnie did not mention. John Coleman also serves as chair of the Transportation Committee for the MPO in the Hartford area. Bob Painter is also a member of the advisory committee that's been formed to help guide the planning and design process for the replacement of the I-84 viaduct, and I think we have a lot of members of that committee in the audience here today. The other points in terms of some of the out-of-state speakers that Arnie failed to mention is that Stephanie Wiggins from LA is a big ardent fan for Los Angeles Lakers, and Colby Bryant and Mayor Oliver Gilbert is a very, very ardent fan of the Miami Heat, and had some interested debates last night as to what's the better team and who's the better player. We didn't resolve those. So at any rate, my job this morning is to sort of provide the setting for the discussion. We have some panelists that have been brought together who really understand a lot of different congestion relief methods, including congestion pricing and what's worked and not worked in their communities. In this case, I need to provide some background as to what the conditions are in the I-84 corridor and a little bit about the I-84 viaduct replacement project as well. So I'm going to try to cover both our study, congestion relief study, as well as a little bit about the viaduct replacement study. And the two projects are being very closely coordinated. So in one sense, they're one seamless project. We've actually got two congestion relief studies ongoing in Connecticut right now. We applied for some special funding from the Federal Highway Administration, got funding grants through what's called the Value Pricing Pilot Program, formerly known as the Congestion Pricing Pilot Program, and we chose to focus on Connecticut's two most congested corridors or areas, and that's I-95 and the Hartford metro area, in particular I-84. Although this is funded with funds from the value pricing or congestion pricing program, we are really taking a multimodal approach in both studies. We will be evaluating the opportunities to use electronic tolling and congestion pricing to help manage congestion in the areas, but it's going to be really just one component of many different strategies that we may have to bring together to find significant relief. And I think you'll hear some of the panelists actually repeat that. Congestion pricing on its own is a big help, but it really needs to be packaged with other things to work effectively. The purpose of the forum itself is to bring together out-of-state experts, talk about what they've done in their communities, share with us some lessons learned, what's worked, what has not worked, what they do over again if they had the chance, and then we're going to have a discussion about do any of those methods apply here in Connecticut, in this case in particular to the Hartford area. And yesterday's session, I think, worked perfectly in that regard in terms of being extremely informative and, again, a lively discussion and debate that went on. The format, very simply, is that I'll start with about a 20-minute overview of the problem and the study outline. Then we'll follow that with the panel of outside professionals speaking about their experience. And then the second panel will be brought in to continue that discussion and ask questions of the first panel. And then the very last thing was we'll open up to questions from the general audience as well. And that'll hopefully we'll get out of here by 12 noon. So I'm expecting the first session to take at least an hour and a half to 2 hours. Yesterday we had about an hour for questions and answers at the end there. So let me start by explaining a couple of basic principles that everybody in Connecticut may not be familiar with, or if they are, it has to do with an image of tolling that they recall from 30 years ago when Connecticut deliberately got rid of all the tolls in the state of Connecticut, and for some good reason. The old toll booths that you used to see on places like the Connecticut Turnpike were barrier tolls set up completely across the highway. People had to actually stop, pay a coin or token to get through the toll barrier. That itself caused tremendous congestion, backups at the toll booths, which in turn led to a lot of accidents. Accidents were in fact the final reason why Connecticut decided to get rid of the tolls after one particular horrific accident in which I think there were like 7 fatalities as a result of a tractor trailer running into the back of the queue. It also caused air quality problems. We need to dispel that image that we have from 30 years ago, because the technology and the industry has changed dramatically in the last 30 years. If we're going to be doing tolling in Connecticut, it will not be with manned toll booths. It will be all electronic forms of toll collection. As the slide here illustrates, those Easy Pass readers or electronic toll tag readers are mounted overhead on a gantry that spans the entire width of the highway, so there's nothing actually standing in the highway itself. As a result, and you can see on the bottom photo there, traffic does not have to stop. It doesn't even need to slow down. Those Easy Pass readers are capable of reading the Easy Pass even at speeds of 60, 70 miles an hour. So really, this is something that does not interfere at all with traffic flow or does not pose any safety problems, unlike the previous generation of toll collection methods. The more important piece is not so much the tolling. Tolling is the method in which you collect the tolls. The congestion pricing is the important piece in terms of being able to achieve some measure of congestion relief. And basically it does that by trying to manage demand during the peak period of use. The way it accomplishes that is that it charges higher toll prices, higher toll rates during the peak traffic period in an attempt to really encourage drivers to shift to something else, either shift to less congested time of day, shift to less congested routes, in many cases shift to transit, or increasingly in a lot of the new tolling projects that are instituted across the country, shift to other lanes on the highway. This is a concept that you'll hear a lot about today. It's a concept called, more generally, managed lane approach to congestion pricing. It's probably better understood as the notion of having express toll lanes. And think of the HOV lanes being converted to something that you're paying a toll for rather than just having to have a minimum number of occupants. So a final point about congestion pricing that I think is worthwhile keeping in mind: of a lot of the congestion relief measures that we can provide, and contrary to ones like a lot of the highway widening or improvements, congestion pricing is a sustainable method of congestion relief. That just like you can adjust prices by time of day to control the demand during the peak period, as travel grows, as population grows, as jobs grow over the years, this provides a way you can adjust the price of the tolling during the peak periods to help maintain good flow even under a condition of growing traffic. So it helps you protect whatever investments you've already made in the highway. The other aspect of this that's important, and I think in this particular case becomes a new opportunity, is one of our goals is to shift people from the highway to transit. And with the opening of CT Fast Track less than a year from now, we'll have a fixed guideway service where the buses run completely free of normal traffic on their own exclusive right-of-way, parallel to I-84. So we think it's going to be a great companion piece to anything we might put in place in terms of congestion pricing on I-84, and it will provide opportunities for, I think, even today without the tolling, for quick, reliable transit trips into Hartford from some of the outlying suburbs. So that's an opportunity. The other thing that we'll talk about today is that new method of tolling and congestion pricing, the notion of managed lanes. This diagram simply illustrates how that works. You have a number of general purpose lanes. Drivers can continue to use those free of charge, no toll apply. But then you, in some cases, what communities have done, have built a couple of new lanes that they operate as express toll lanes. in order to use those express toll lanes, you have to pay the toll to use it. Drivers may not use it every day, but as a technique, it's growing in popularity, in large part because drivers like the option of having a choice on those days that they need it. They may not use it, like I said, every day, but a day that they have a critical appointment, they're running late to pick up their kid from childcare, or they have to be to a conference at a particular time. Those are the days they may choose to pay the toll and use the express toll lane. More than the popularity in terms of support from the drivers who like having that option is the fact that this has been a now widely proven and effective tool for providing congestion relief and congestion management in a lot of parts of the country. And this map simply illustrates the number of places that have either already adopted it or are in the process of adopting it. This is by far the most popular form of tolling that's being put in place in the country today. One example, and one of the most successful examples of express toll lanes, is Miami, I-95, and we've actually got two members of the out-of-state panel today, Debora Rivera and Mayor Gilbert, who will be speaking to that project, but some of the results they gained from that were simply astounding in terms of the amount of congestion relief provided. And I think Debora has the numbers that she'll share with you in terms of travel speeds before and after. I'll then switch gears here and now provide more of an overview of I-84 and the problems on I-84. And those basically consist of the fact that we've got a very aging piece of infrastructure, and it's very costly to replace, and for DOT's perspective, becoming increasingly costly just to maintain. It is also a facility that has problems with congestion and safety as well, very high accident rates, in part related to the amount of congestion and bad operations design out there today. We'll talk about that, but we also feel, despite the problems in the corridor, there's some special opportunities. In particular, knowing that we're going to be replacing that facility, we have the opportunity to rethink what that facility should be and basically reshape Hartford, undo some of the damage that was done in the original construction of I-84 through the city. This will just give you an idea, and this is more for the out-of-state panelists, of what the study area is that we're looking at. It's I-84. It shows the study area in detail here. It shows it also in relationship to the rest of the freeway system. In Hartford, you can see we have basically a radial freeway system with I-91 and I-84 intersecting right in downtown Hartford, which is part of the problem we experience on I-84. The area of interest in what is the focus of the ongoing planning and design study for the replacement project is shown here in the shaded area. Most of this is on structure. It's at least 3/4 of a mile long. Like I said, it's 50 years old, heavily congested and prone to safety problems. The department basically understands at this point that we're going to have to do something to replace that. It was built in 1965. And we've been running with that for 50 years. It has, at that 50-year mark, we really exceeded the normal expected life expectancy, which is why it becomes so expensive to keep that in good operating condition. The cost of maintaining that facility and repairing it grows every year. And there's only so much we can do. So really, we're going to have an opportunity here. Now that the department is recognizing it has to do a replacement out here. That same facility and its physical presence has also had another impact, and that's an impact on the community of Hartford itself. And those impacts were mostly negative and extensive. It consumes large amounts of land. It divided neighborhoods. It divided business districts, including the central business district, and it actually, in some cases, divided parks within the city of Hartford. And it certainly affected in a negative way the quality of life for residents of the city, and I think as well helped slow economic development in the city over the long run as well. So there's a lot of negatives associated with the existing facility. We think we can do better moving forward. We also have another reason to take a look at this facility. It is by far Connecticut's busiest freeway. It may not be its most congested, but it's its busiest. It carries about 175,000 vehicles a day, which is about 15 to 20,000 cars a day more than what we see on I-95. On a regular basis, and I think people probably experienced some of that this morning, we see traffic jams of about 6 to 7 miles in length. It is, of the corridors in Hartford, this is our most congested corridor. It is a little bit, it's less congested than I-95, but it's still a significant congestion, as this next diagram illustrates. This is a time-space diagram that shows through color coding what the, where and when and how severe congestion is in the corridor. Let me just give you a brief idea. The top part of the slide represents the westbound direction, or outbound from downtown Hartford towards West Hartford. The bottom half of the slide represents the eastbound or inbound direction, and we actually have along the bottom here key landmarks that will give you a guide as to where you are in the corridor. We're probably looking at, I'm guessing, about a 10 to 15 mile section in here, starting with Route 9 all the way out on the West Hartford, Farmington Town line area, all the way through West Hartford. You have the city line represented there. You have Sigourney Street, which is one of the major exits off of I-84. And then you see I-91, which is the interchange with I-91 right in downtown Hartford. The diagram actually extends beyond that across the river into East Hartford. The other thing that is on this thing that you need to understand is the timeline, and that's represented on the vertical axis. You have 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the outbound direction listed on the top side, and then on the bottom half you also have that same timeline from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening. The color coding is shown on the bottom here. If you've got green color, that means you've got pretty good flow, traffic moving at 60 miles an hour or better. But as you shade towards the yellow and the oranges and the reds, speeds drop off dramatically, so that if you're in the dark red, the speeds are below 20 miles an hour. So you have some very significant congestion, certainly with the reds out there. And then to help you interpret this, and I apologize for the complexity of the diagram, but it's also a very powerful graphic illustration of what happens. We're showing first here the AM condition in the inbound direction. We have congestion extending over 6 miles in length. Also in the morning in the outbound direction we still have 3 miles of congestion even in the outbound. That brings you out to about the Sigourney Street exit, which is the last of the major employment exits within Hartford. So that part of that is people getting to work in the Asylum Hill area and that are part of that congestion. If you look then for the afternoon, the problem actually gets significantly worse in the afternoon. In the afternoon, in the outbound direction, we're seeing traffic backups of 6 to 7 miles in length, a little more severe with the amount of red that's shown there. But we're also seeing that we have significant congestion in the inbound direction, about 4 miles in length, and a lot of very severe congestion showing with the very deep red colors here. The other aspect of this is just how long, not just the geographic length or extent of the congestion, but how long the congestion lasts. And we're seeing in the afternoon congestion, in both cases, we're looking at congestion that lasts about 2.5 hours, maybe in some cases 3 hours. Much less severe than what we saw on I-95 yesterday, which is 4 to 5 hours, but still very frustrating if you're one of those that are stuck in traffic. In the morning, congestion is a little less significant. It lasts only about 1.5 hours, both in the inbound and the outbound direction. So that gives you a very graphic illustration of what congestion looks like, where it occurs, and how severe it is within this particular corridor. Despite the problems of congestion, of safety, of an aging piece of infrastructure, we also really have an opportunity here. We're made a determination at DOT. We're going to do something to fix that viaduct, possibly replace the entire viaduct. That really provides an opportunity to do it differently this time. It really provides an opportunity to undo or correct some of the mistakes we made with the design from 1960s. And there's an ongoing study being done by the Viaduct replacement study team that suggests that there are probably some design aspects of the facility that will work, that'll allow us to make this a much less intrusive type of design, placing much of the highway below or at grade. And more importantly, one of the goals of this project is simply to shrink the footprint of the highway so it's not as wide, doesn't consume as much land. And all of that is being evaluated in the study that is ongoing now. The challenge, though, that presents is you're being asked to shrink the footprint of the highway. At the same time, we're being asked to provide some measure of congestion relief. How do you do both of that? I mean, it's usually counterintuitive. Your usual reaction to providing congestion relief is to provide additional lanes. In this case, we're not going to have that luxury. All right? And so I think there are two opportunities to actually achieve both goals here. The first is represented by the design team who have already begun looking at the number of interchanges, the operational problems, the left-hand entrances, the length of weaving that occurs and disrupts traffic flow, and they think through operational improvements in a better design, they can actually achieve a fair amount of congestion reduction, not eliminate it entirely, but make a significant improvement. We also believe that congestion pricing, if that's brought in as part of the solution, can achieve even more congestion relief within that corridor. It's worked well in other places, and you'll hear some of those examples today. We also believe it is a good investment to make because it provides for sustainable capacity. If we're going to make an investment of $3, $4, $5 billion in a replacement for the I-84 viaduct, we don't want that capacity to be totally absorbed within the first few years as traffic grows. The congestion pricing provides you with the opportunity of managing that demand and keeping it manageable even as population employment grows and traffic demand grows. You just focus on keeping flow moving well during that peak period by adjusting your prices. So we think that is an opportunity. It's also an opportunity in terms of congestion pricing to possibly help pay for this project. The cost of replacement is going to be about $3 to $5 billion. That's going to be extremely difficult today, and it's getting even more so as we move forward into the future. Federal funding is uncertain at best. We also know that over time it's been flat or shrinking, and just whether it's state or federal, the primary revenue source is the gas tax. The gas tax is not sustainable. It might provide a reasonable amount of revenue today, but as we increase the fuel efficiency of automobiles, and that fuel efficiency for the fleet is expected to double within the next 10 years, that's half the amount of gasoline that'll be used. That's half the amount of gas tax that can be collected. So we know the gas tax is not sustainable. We're probably not going to be able to rely on standard state and federal funding sources to provide all of the funds that we need to move this project forward. One of the things we'll be looking at as part of this project is whether or not congestion pricing will or can provide a significant source of revenue to help finance the project. So we really have two goals with that in this particular case. The other, I'll just very briefly mention that one of the things that the design team has to do in order to move forward with the viaduct replacement project is to prepare a financial plan. Given the size of the project, they're required to demonstrate that the state has the fiscal resources to actually construct and then maintain that particular facility. If they can't demonstrate that, and as I said, it's going to become increasingly difficult with normal sources, they will not be allowed to proceed with that project. We think the pricing study is going to provide a good complement to that as to whether or not they can look to this alternate revenue source to help supplement standard or traditional financing mechanisms to move the project forward. But that's the purpose of the study, is to find out just what could be generated. Here's a little bit about the scope of the study. The study is going to allow us to take a full evaluation, much more in-depth than we could under just the replacement study itself, of pricing and tolling methods, testing out some of the new technologies and pricing methods that are being put in place across the country. We'll also be looking at ways of combining or packaging pricing with some of the new design options that the design team is looking at. Some of the options that we're going to be exploring, the notion of tolling all lanes on I-84, creating but tolling only an express toll lane. We'll look at different toll pricing discount options for the facility as well. We'll again take a close look at what's being done in terms of the design of the new facility, in terms of collector distributor roads that may be part of that, how that affects residents as well as employees of the city, as to whether they are forced to or not required to pay a toll as they go to and from work. And then finally, we're expanding the study a little bit beyond just the I-84 corridor. We're going to look at some of the existing HOV lanes in the region and try to make a determination or not how much congestion relief we could achieve on those facilities if we converted those to hot lanes or express toll lanes, if you will. And just to give people in the audience as well as our out-of-state panels a little bit of background about the existing HOV lanes. They're currently restricted to vehicles that are carrying 2 or more vehicles. It used to be 3. It was dropped down to 2 because there wasn't a lot of use on it. It exists on 2 of our highways, I-84 and I-91. They are configured in a way that actually we think would make it fairly easy to convert to hot lanes because of the wide separation between the HOV lane and the general purpose lanes. They have separate entrances and exits, and I think just as importantly, they have excess capacity. They're only used by about 600, 700 vehicles a day during the peak hour. That gives plenty of room to put additional traffic in there, traffic who might be single occupant vehicles who are willing to pay a toll so they can bypass some of the congestion that exists on I-91, which we think will also have benefits for the rest of the people in I-91, and you'll hear some of those stories this morning. These are where the HOV lanes are located today, so we'll take a look at converting those to HOT lanes. Carpools would still be allowed, but we'll also allow people who are willing to pay a toll use those facilities as well. We'll take a quick look as to whether or not an express toll lane makes sense on I-84 on the other side, which is part of our focus of our study, and also just look very briefly at the notion of whether or not we can connect all of those HOV lanes and operate them as a system. So with that, I'll just conclude my remarks here and reemphasize that congestion pricing is effective and, more importantly, provides a method of sustainable relief by managing peak use even as demand grows. We're coordinating this study very closely with the I-84 Viaduct project, and as we move forward, we'll be assessing whether or not pricing can help us actually achieve significant amount of congestion in the corridor. We expect our work to be done in early part of 2015. So with that, I'll turn it back to Arnie.